In this video, we're going to look more closely at factoring trinomials with leading coefficient 1, and in particular the questions that you need to be asking yourself as you go through the process of factoring trinomials of this form. And sort of training your brain. How do we think about this? Okay, so with x squared plus 7x plus 12, we're trying to factor that. Okay, we need to find a pair of numbers whose product is 12, right? And whose sum is 7. Again, we're looking at trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so, and we're trying to factor that into the product of two binomials, right? So we're just trying to figure out what those factors are. All right, so we want two numbers that multiply to give us 12. And then before we even start doing that, what do we know about the signs, positive or negative, of these numbers? Okay, so when we multiply these through, we get positive 12, which means either both of them have to be positive or both of them have to be negative. I'm voting that both of them have to be positive because the middle term is positive 7x, right? So we've got a positive and a positive happening here because if we have two negatives and we add those together, we're going to get another negative, right? But our middle term is positive. Okay, so they both have to be positive, and so we're going to create factor pairs for positive 12. Okay, so I just start with 1, right? So there's 1 and 12 for sure. There's 2 and 6, right? There's 3 and 4. And then we start repeating, right? Like 4 times 3, 6 times 2. We've got all the pairs at this point. Okay, so if we add these together, which two have the needed sum? So 1 and 12 is 13, 2 and 6 is 8, 3 and 4 is 7. Aha, that's the one. So 3 and 4 are the numbers that we need. Okay, so that means that x squared plus 7x plus 12 is equivalent to x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 4. And of course, we always check this. You can use the rectangle method or we can just FOIL it, right? Okay, x times x is x squared, right? X times 4 is 4x. 3 times x is 3x. And 3 times 4 is 12, okay? So we see that those two numbers, the 3 and the 4, they multiply to give us 12, but just in the FOILing process, we see that we have to add them to get the middle term, right? Okay, so just some things to note there. Okay, so let's do another example, but where the signs of B and C are different. Okay, so in this example, we're trying to factor x squared minus 6x plus 8. We need to find a pair of numbers whose product is 8 and whose sum is negative 6. So what do we know about the signs, positive or negatives, of those numbers? Okay, well, we have to find two numbers that multiply to give us 8. So that means they both either have to be positive or they both have to be negative. But since the sum that we're looking for is negative, both of the numbers we're looking for have to be negative. Okay, so we're creating a table of factor pairs for 8. But they both have to be negative. So like negative 1 times negative 8 would give us positive 8. Negative 2 times negative 4 would also give us positive 8. Now if we add these, their sum, negative 1 minus 8 is negative 9. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. Aha! That's the one that we need. Okay, so which two numbers have the needed sum? Negative 2 and negative 4. Okay, so we're going to factor this trinomial, x squared minus 6x plus 8. And we know that the factors are x minus 2, the quantity x minus 2 times the quantity x minus 4. And again, when we check this, we've got the quantity x minus 2 times the quantity x minus 4. When we FOIL that, we should get what we started with. And by the way, that FOILing method or creating the little rectangular box and multiplying that way, it's all good. Um, x times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is minus 4x. Negative 2 times 2x is minus 2x. And negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8. So we end up with x squared minus 6x plus 8, which is the expression we were originally given. All right, so hopefully we're getting the hang of this. So this is one more example where the signs are a little bit different. So we're asked to factor x squared minus 9x minus 10. We need to find a pair of numbers whose product is negative 10 and whose sum is negative 9. Okay, now in this case, one of our numbers, because the product has to be negative 10, to get negative 10, one of the numbers in the product has to be negative and one has to be positive, right? So one of them is going to be positive and one of them is going to be negative. And when we add them up, we get a negative number. So we want to create a table of factor pairs for negative 10, right? Okay, so we could have negative 1 and 10. We could have negative 2 and 5. And are there any other pairs other than that? So we could also have it the other way, right? 1 and negative 10 and 2 and negative 5. Okay. So when we add these up, negative 1 plus 10 is 9. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3. 1 minus 10 is negative 9. And 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Okay, so the negative 9 one is what we want, right? Because we're looking for the sum of negative 9. So the two numbers that have that sum are 1 and negative 10. Okay, so when we factor the trinomial x squared minus 9x minus 10, the factors will be x plus 1 times x minus 10. And of course we want to check it by FOILing our result. So we'll go with x plus 1 times x minus 10. If we FOIL this, do we get what we originally started with? X times x is x squared. X times negative 10 is minus 10x. 1 times x is x. And 1 times negative 10 is minus 10. So we have x squared. Negative 10x plus x is minus 9x. Minus 10. Indeed, it checks out. Okay, so all of these examples give us just a way to sort of train our brain, the questions that you need to ask when you're trying to factor a trinomial whose leading coefficient is 1. So now let's get some more practice without being prompted by some of these questions, just thinking about what you need to do